Hi, Isabel. How are you today?
I'm great. Hi, Dana. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. We were both chatting before we went on record here, and we're both excited about talking today about scaling smart. So we both are in the thick of high growth B2B companies, and I'm excited to have Isabelle Papoulias with us to talk about her perspectives and views on operationalizing go-to-market in a hyper-growth environment. So that's what our podcast is all about. And Isabel, let me introduce you to our audience. So excited that you're spending time with us. So Isabelle Papoulias is the head of strategic operations and marketing at EliteOps, a security services provider in the zero trust space. She is a senior leader with a diverse background in marketing, sales, account management, and business operations. Isabelle is passionate about working with early stage B2B tech companies to help them set up for scale by focusing their go to market, building a marketing engine, and setting up the broader operational processes. So that is foundational to the and really existential to the long-term prospects of a B2B software company, I'll tell you that. Um, but so Isabel, you've had such a dynamic career. You've got advertising executive to CMO to chief of staff, and now head of strategic ops and marketing. So kind of what's the thread that's tied it all together? What took you down this path?
Yeah, that's a great question. Before I get there, by the way, I want to say the I loved your word around existential. I hadn't quite thought about it this way, but I think that's true. So I'll borrow that. I love it. Thank you for the
Hmm.
for having me here. I'm excited to talk about this. Um, yeah, the I was thinking about this before, we did this podcast. The common thread or the main thing in common is being a connector. So whether I was working at a big agency in global account management on big brands, usually global roles, right? So I was connecting the dots across the world, really getting, you know, many local markets, hundreds to march to the drumbeat of global strategy, right?
Hmm.
And over communicating, spinning many plates in the air at the same time, having to influence many folks and many egos, I will say, across the world. So, and then you take that over to a CMO role, and the CMO is very much a connector within the organization. I've always felt that. I think marketing sits at the center of the company, right? We are um, enabling and influencing the go-to-market, and so we're working with sales, we're working with product, we're working with customer success, you name it, right? So I think we're naturally connectors, and so to me that's the thread. And I should also say, I'm a connector in my own life outside of work.
Hmm.
I connect people. So I think it's probably an extension of my personality. And so in the professional realm, I connect people across the org to collaborate, to drive consensus when consensus is appropriate, is needed, to connect processes and work streams and so on. And so I think that's definitely a common function in all the titles I've had.
And that's such a critical skill set. And I think that, it makes sense that you have that as naturally part of your personality and how you work, because it is critical in that, that connective tissue of go-to-market and marketing, especially globally, when I remember being in that role myself, and every different market said we do marketing differently, right? And you don't know our market, so you can't tell us what to do. And
But yeah, I think that's a great statement, and that leads me to another thing that is also, I think, a common thread is the empathy.
mhm.
Um, because I've been in different roles, I feel like I have a unique understanding of how hard each of these the work is in each one of these functions, right?
Mhm.
Um, whether you're in sales, whether you're in marketing, whether you're in product, and whether you're in the US or whether you're ex-US. And while I spike in some areas more than others, I think I have enough knowledge to, again, understand how hard the job is and be able to enable these functions to be their
Hmm.
best, right? And so that's something I've felt in every role.
Yeah, and I think that is, I love that you brought that up because, you know, what I found, and a big philosophy of ours at ayeQ is all the alignment. And
Mhm.
that cross-functional alignment is the secret sauce. If you can do that, that is that is really foundational for hypergrowth. If you get alignment rather than fighting against each other, you're all rowing in the same direction. And
Right.
the
But sorry, finish your thought.
no, go ahead.
But to connect the alignment back to empathy, I think it's not just, for me, it's not just alignment for alignment's sake. And I never thought about this before until now. I think there's a genuine desire to make people want to be their best, help them be
Hmm.
their most effective, no matter what role they're in, right? So it's alignment because I truly want to make us better individually and together as a team to deliver on the objectives of the company. Without,
I love that.
I'm
And
getting a
I
little
mean,
too psychological here, but I think
no, but
it's big motivation.
it's true because if you can that's how you create this culture of innovation, and create an environment where people motivate themselves, right? That's,
Yeah,
going down to the individual level is, why make sure everybody knows why they're doing what they're doing, and why they're important to the overall success and the overall process. Um, so, we kind of alluded to it. What do you see as the most critical components of of go-to-market in hypergrowth?
a couple of things. I focus is my second favorite F word, is what I like to say. You can imagine what the other one is. I I'm a former New Yorker, we we use some curse words. Focus, I think, is the most critical. A company needs to be really honest about its core competency and what it does best.
Hmm.
And I think it's very hard for us to do, generally speaking,
Hmm.
in our space. And I'll speak for my space, right? In B2B tech, startup world, early stage. There's a lot of enthusiasm and there's big picture vision, and you want product market fit. You may be going after, or you haven't quite crossed the chasm, and so you're going after every single possible prospect. Um, and so what happens is it's easy to want to be too many things to too many people.
Hmm.
One of the things that attracted me to EliteOps from day one, the engagement had started as a fractional engagement and it became a full-time role later, was the focus of the organization. So we are a security services provider. We're in a very niche area of cybersecurity, zero trust. I won't get into sort of the weeds of that. But the point is, we know what we do well. We do this one thing well, and we stick to that.
Hmm.
We have a core partner that we work with very closely, that's Zscaler in the space. And again, our entire go-to-market comes from that focus. Now, it's not to say that the go-to-market won't evolve eventually, right? There will be phases during the growth of the organization, but right now, for the reasonable near-term, mid-term future, we're hyper focused on that. And so I think focus is important in knowing truly what your value prop is, not what you hope your value prop to be or what you would like it to be, I guess is a better word, but what it really is today,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
With the expertise you have in-house, um, and then finding the market for it, right? So the second thing is related but a little different, which is ruthless prioritization.
Mm-hmm.
going to market. Again, I work with companies in early stages. You only have so many resources. Um, having whether we're using a fully baked strategic planning process like OKRs or EOS or V2 moms, or pick your method or
Mm-hmm.
not, it doesn't matter. But having a well-articulated corporate objective, and then strategies that will meet those objectives, and then trickling this down to the different functions across the organization, then they will then have their own objectives to meet the corporate one with their strategies and the tactics and the measures of success.
Mm-hmm.
And there shouldn't be 15 objectives. Three is always a good number.
Yep.
Usually no more than that. And so I think those are the two components. Ultimately, it's all about focus and prioritization. The last thing is, we'll probably get into this later, but it's people. When I think about my operational framework, how I think strategically about operations and how it powers the go-to-market, it's people, process, technology, data. And the people, process, technology, I mean, it's not, I didn't invent this, right? I have added data because I think knowing what success looks like and looking at the right data is key to success, and then you have that feedback loop. But it's not for nothing that people is the first pillar of that construct. And so what does it take? It takes hiring the right people, and then it takes motivating and keeping those people, which, without going too much off the topic here, is also why I think HR is a hugely strategic function within the organization. Now that I'm touching HR and running it day to day, I'm extremely passionate about that, because I think HR as a function is very undervalued. We see HR as paperwork and
Mm-hmm.
benefits and my pay stub. You don't have a company if you don't have people. People are your engine for growth. Everything
Mm-hmm.
else comes after.
I could not agree with you more. I think that's really and looking at it as, that HR component, the talent component is um is critical, because it's the data that you want to optimize. The data is generated by people, right? So it's like, okay, so um are you creating that environment? And I love the focus, and depending on the size of the organization, that focus is uh more or less difficult. If you're in this trying to cross that chasm, that is such a hard place to be, when you have, maybe your marketing engine isn't firing on all
Mhm,
cylinders and your salespeople are hungry. And when they're hungry, they're going to go after anything that moves,
mhm.
right? And then it's like, wait, we are wasting our sales cycles because we are going off of core, right? And so, coming back to marketing and sales and executives being, hyper vigilant on keeping that focus is that's really hard to do.
It is, and it has to come from the top down. It has to come from the CEO,
Hmm.
or the co-founders, or whatever. But um, and it has to be documented, and it has to be how should I call it, communicated, and it has to be on a cadence, right? This is how I call it, like red, what is it? Green, red, yellow, right? Like, so these are the objectives to the quarter, right? You may have an annual plan, but I like to break things into quarters, because I think it drives action when the teams know what they're doing over the next few months, and how that ladders up to the annual plan. But having this recurring communication, whether in the ELT meetings and then bigger all hands, so everyone knows, like, this is how we're tracking. This is again, remember, these are the objectives, these are strategies, these are tactics, these are the things that we're doing. This is how we're tracking. This is working. This is not working. And then repeat the next quarter and so on. It's almost like it has to be part of the DNA of the organization. It's a muscle that everybody has to grow and train. And look, it doesn't happen overnight, right? Like it does
Mhm.
not.
Well, and I think that the data piece that you also pointed out is the fundamental piece where everybody can be speaking from facts, right? And so moving from an opinion to a fact-based, evidence-based level playing field. I mean, I remember actually being in a CMO role with an early hyper growth company, and the founder and CEO was convinced of of Google AdWords being the basis on which he built the entire company. And it was a completely false assumption. And it wasn't until we started getting this big picture and complete visibility on sources of pipeline, who's working on what pipeline, whether people are even working on the focus we've defined as a leadership team. How do you know if people are? You only know if you've got this level playing field of a source of truth.
Yeah, I think the level playing field is important in terms of data. I have someone you should speak with actually. I think you'd have a great conversation. A colleague, former colleague of mine, his name is Johan Abadi. I'll call him out here. I'm sure he won't mind. Also, marketing leader, growth marketer, expertise. The line that he has that I love is don't bring an opinion to a data fight.
I love that.
Yeah. So
I love that.
so feel free to use it. It's his, not mine. Credit where credit is due. That said, I still believe now I'm wearing my marketing hat. So this is more narrow than just the go-to market, but in marketing especially, it is a mix of art and science. And I think we are perhaps over reliant on data, and there are things that are still important that cannot be measured. Just because they can't be measured doesn't mean that they're not important, right?
Hmm.
So that's the demand creation piece and more of what we call the brand, where we can have linear attribution, but then over time, because you're building the awareness and the consideration and a better, more positive predisposition in the market, your ACV may climb, right? Your deal velocity will climb as well, right? But you can't. It's common sense that it's because people know you and because they like the company and they're more inclined to talk to us and more inclined to do business with us. But you can't measure that, right? It doesn't mean it's not working. So I think that when we talk about data, and I know I'm probably speaking to the wrong person here, given what you do, but I think we have to be careful to not make decisions all the time only with data. There's an art and a sort of human element that needs to come in as well.
And I think that's critical, because even with the rise of AI and predictive models, it takes the human intuition to be able to call BS on what the what the data is trying to say. It's like not possible. Something's wrong in the data, right? And so there is that expertise, um, that I don't think will ever replace, to be able to know what AI is wrong because it's going to be wrong sometimes, and that takes the human intuition.
I agree. I'm a humanist. I'm on the human side of AI. I think AI is amazing, but I think you'll always need the humans to manage the AI agents, right? Uh,
Hmm.
the You mentioned something else, and now I'm had it in my mind, and now I think it just slipped. It doesn't matter. Something about data. I don't remember
Yeah.
what it was.
Yeah. Well, so you've been in so many, different types of companies and at different stages. You've worked in multiple PE-backed companies. Let's talk about the PE-backed companies for a minute. Like how does that environment um, influence or even create requirements for how you approach go-to-market?
Yeah, that's a great question. And just to tweak that a little bit, so I worked in VC environments, I worked in PE environments, and I've also worked in, I guess let's call it self-funded
Mm-hmm.
environments where beyond bootstrapped, it's not just the co-founder's money, but it's, there's individual high net worth investors, but there's no institutional investment, right? And all these environments I have found to be very, very different. Your question to P specifically, and look, my experience is not necessarily universal truth. It could be just where, the investors that I worked with. I feel like, strangely enough, go-to-market is less of a conversation in a P environment than in a VC or self-funded, right, which are earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And to be honest, that was surprising to me. But knowing what I know today, my hypothesis is because P typically comes in a little later, let's just say the go-to-market is a little more baked. The company
Mm-hmm.
has to figure out product market fit, or at least that's the assumption. And so what I find in the board meetings, there's much more emphasis on the numbers and the performance than the market dynamics and the go-to-market conversation. Again, one
Mm-hmm.
person's experience. Um, Others may have had different experiences. Versus earlier stages where we're still figuring it out, right? And so that's more in the conversation. And yet, the truth about product market fit is it's fleeting. You can have it and then you can lose it.
Mm-hmm.
And you can lose it in later stages.
Mm-hmm.
Because not because you're doing something wrong, but the market is changing, right? And so you do have to revisit. Um, and so that would be I don't know if that answers your question, but I'm generalizing a little bit here, but I think, self-funded or non-institutional investment plus VC, there's more roll up your sleeves, let's have a go-to-market conversation. P assumption is, I guess I'll say like just very casually, we know what we're doing. So now, let's focus on the revenue. Let's focus on the performance. And so the conversation becomes more performance driven, function by function, especially with marketing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Um,
and it's once the PEs get involved that you've reached that inevitable stage where the impossible stage has already gotten through, right? And so that really makes a lot of sense to me is, once you get to that PE stage, it is operationalizing the, lather, rinse, repeat of sales, right?
yeah,
And
and there's more at
unless
that
the
point.
numbers are bad,
Yeah, and at
then
that
they'll
point,
get into go to
there's
market.
already processes built in, right? You have more of an alignment between the functions. You probably do have a strategic planning system in place. Um, the PE firm probably has some processes they're bringing in as well. So yeah, it's more mature.
Hmm. But
In theory, at least. I don't know that it's always like the case in execution. And you may have M&A, in which case, the go-to-market obviously changes. And so I
and
think
I
there.
think that the go to market becomes more subtle, right?
Yeah, I think
So
that's a good word. Settle is a good word. Yeah.
because when you're operationalizing, like you generally have I mean, you're obviously way beyond product market fit, but to your point, markets change.
Mhm.
Maybe it's who's your ICP? What segment is actually responding better to your messages? And so it's almost like this dynamic shifting of the go to market because now you've got the data to be able to say, tell me what my IC, that's what we're doing. That's what ayeQ is doing, right? Tell me who is my ICP? Who should I be targeting? What is my golden sales cycle? What should these metrics look like? And so I think, it is the refinement once you get to the size of
Exactly.
the
Yes.
PE firm.
Refinement, optimization was the word I had in my head as you were talking. I think that's the thing at the PE stage. It's more you're refining, let's say your ICP. And again, in theory, I guess, most commonly, there's always exceptions to everything, right? Whereas in the other scenarios, I think you're still building. You're still
Hmm.
figuring out in large part.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. So I want to go back to something that you mentioned earlier, and you were talking about cross-functional alignment. And it's still been echoing in my head that there is understanding of each of the pressure that each of these functions is facing because you've lived each one of these functions, right? I mean, product is always going to say, marketing's out selling stuff we don't have. And then shift that a little bit earlier. And sales, marketing is going to say sales is out there selling stuff that we don't have. It is, then you get to customer success who has to pick up all the pieces. So, but understanding what drives each of these functions to push the envelope that they are pushing is important. And and necessary, right? As you're in this hyper growth stage, right? The feedback loop is so tremendously fast. So I mean, to unpack that a little bit more for us and kind
Yeah,
of.
a couple of thoughts are popping in my head as we're talking about this. I mean, the I go back to the empathy thing, and really, for me, fundamentally, the cross-functional alignment is about collaboration, right? And collaboration and or consensus, and they're not the same thing, right? I don't think decisions should be made by committee, right, all the time. But I do think alignment happens when people feel like they're part of the conversation and that
Mhm.
their ideas are taken into account, right? Um, so that's sort of thought, so the sort of the first thing that comes to mind. Um, Over communication, I think is always a good approach. So this goes back to having a strategic plan, knowing what the marketing plan is, knowing what the sales, plan is, knowing what the product roadmap is, having these things shared in standing meetings between the teams. I mean, product, sales, and marketing should be joined at the hip. That's like the pod,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Um, all hands meetings are also a great place to showcase the successes around go-to-market, and I think that reinforces the motivating people and the power of collaboration, how we're like just better together rather than working in silos. So so for me, always comes down to focus, like, and know what the objectives are. Everybody should know what the objectives are. Every function's objectives should ladder up to the corporate objectives, and that needs to be communicated regularly, like the work that we're doing. And people, no one should be working in silos.
Mhm.
One other thing, and this is completely, because okay, this might be a kind of crazy idea, but I've seen this work very, very well. This is much more practical. We should all be shadowing each other. And I learned this from Latne Conan, by the way, who's the CRO of Sixth Sense, an ABM platform.
Mhm.
She was my board advisor several jobs back. Um, when she started her role as CMO, she went and spent a few days with the SDRs on her team. She literally sat next to them and was kind of doing what they were doing to see what their day-to-day was like. And I think
Mhm.
marketing people should sell more.
Mhm.
Some sales reps should probably spend a couple of days in marketing.
I think that's
Marketing and
brilliant.
sales should probably sit with the head of product in a couple of customer calls and see what those conversations are like.
Mhm.
Uh, and it sounds silly, or it's not silly. It sounds very simplistic, but the better I understand what you do and the better you understand what I do, the better we can collaborate and the better alignment we'll have.
I think you're onto something, Isabel, and I think it's brilliant. Um,
Would you
I
like that?
remember, I remember I've obviously worked with a lot of high growth B2B companies. And I remember sometimes walking in, but this is when I was much younger and feisty. And I would, and it's so easy to be right, to go in and say your process ought to work like this. It's really hard to be productive, right? And knowing the difference is super important. There's a time to shut your mouth, even though you know what the answer is, right?
Mm,
And now,
yeah.
with all experience, I can look back at those times and say, I totally understand why the process was the way it was. It wasn't an ideal process, but they would never have gotten to the stage where they were if they hadn't deprioritized the pristine nature of whatever process it was that I was looking at. And that
Mm.
gets back to your radical prioritization. And some of that is just comes with the territory when you're in a hyper growth environment. But I mean, what is your experience when if you're constantly prioritizing, there are going to be some areas that you kind of know how they should operate and they're not operating like that. How do you manage that?
That's an interesting question too. I mean, I think you have to um not everything can be an A plus is how I usually say it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's good enough, good, better, best.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so some things are going to be good or even more evolved, and some are not going to be that great, but it's okay for now, right? So again, it's knowing what should be an A and what is a B, and you're okay with a B, and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes even a B minus. And if it's in less than a B minus, you probably shouldn't be doing it at all, right? So um, yeah, I mean, I don't know if that helps, but it's kind of we can do too many things well. It's just not possible.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think what I am loving about what you're saying is, when you are ready and you have the experience and the maturity and the wisdom to step into a leadership role like you have, it requires knowing how to prioritize when many people will come in and see a lot of things that could change, but keeping everybody focused, keeping the prioritization at hand. I mean, that is not easy. And it does take kind of that experience, that finesse, that you've been able to deliver. And so it's easy to say, well, focus, prioritization, but to actually do it and keep everybody focused, it
Oh
is
yeah, it's not.
hypervigilance.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting it's easy at all. I think if anything, it's the hardest part of any leadership role. Um, and that's why, it needs to come from the top, right? And so if you have a CEO that um, if the CEO is not sticking to the priorities, right? There's three and the other fourth, then that sends a signal that it's
Well,
okay,
so
right?
so
So and then just more, closer to the ground, it's also about learning how to say no. And look, I actually had a specific example of that today, right? There was a request that came into marketing, which was a completely reasonable thing to ask. And it's something I had thought about before. And it's on my plan for Q4. It's not on my plan for right now, right?
mhm.
I'm sure this person will be pretty passionate about it. Now, in the scheme of things, it's not the most important thing to go do right now when we have essentially, hardly any marketing and we're building the function from the ground up. That is not the most important thing to go build. It's more of a nice to have versus a must have. But I'm probably going to be in a place where I'm going to have this conversation,
Mhm.
right? So yeah, I mean, I'm talking about ruthless prioritization. it's one thing to, if you do have it well documented and you have a strategic plan and everything, it's one thing. First of all, it's one thing to have it documented and have an appetite within the organization and the ELT to have a plan that's well documented. That's one thing. The second thing is sticking to it.
Hmm.
Both of these things are hard,
Hmm.
but you have to start
And
somewhere.
well, so I knowing you, it is you're probably a force that keeps people sticking to it, right? And keeps people focused and keeps that, probably managing up and managing sideways.
Sideways, yes, and down, yes. Oh my God, I love this conversation. We're speaking exactly the same language. So yes, like I said, my favorite word is one of my two favorite F words is focus. I'm very passionate about that. I'm pretty sure I don't do it perfectly every time, but I endeavor for sure to do that.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean that's when you look at a successful leadership team, you that has to be a component. Somebody on the team has to have that. And so I
And
am.
that's usually, again, I mean, so I think either someone, it doesn't matter, I don't have pride of ownership or anything like that, but it's usually someone with a central role, as in like a role that touches multiple parts of the organization that's perhaps more of a generalist role, right? So it's either the COO or the CMO, or maybe there's a chief of staff or something like that. The CEO usually doesn't have time to, the CEO can dictate vision and priorities, but in my experience, they don't have the time and sometimes not the expertise or the personality to be driving the execution. I think that's what a great COO does, in my opinion. I mean, call it whatever
Mhm,
you want, like COO, chief of staff. I don't know. All those titles are a little interchangeable. Of VP operations and strategy, whatever you want to call it. But the number two to a founder or co-founders that takes their vision and enables the execution.
mhm,
That's usually the person that owns the prioritization.
mhm. Well, so which I'm thinking back to all the different leadership teams that I've worked with and thinking sometimes it's a CS. It's really the person like that you've described, right? I mean that person who can motivate and focus and prioritize and keep everybody on track. That person just naturally uh, evolves into that number two role, right?
And ideally, that person, and I think that's the case, right, for most of those roles is, I mean, that's my background too. It's, that person has had enough experience with, if not all, many of the different functions within the company. I mean, none of us have done everything, have
Hmm.
touched every area. Um, None of us can be deep experts on every single area, but there are folks like me who, I mean, I consider myself a generalist.
Hmm.
I have to be careful with the G word because I feel like there's always a debate between what's better, is it an expert or a generalist? I mean, it's both, are needed. You need
Hmm.
you need the deep experts, and then you also need the generalists that will connect the dots across the organization because the go-to-market is getting incredibly um, there's a lot of expert functions under the go-to-market.
Hmm.
The buyer journey, customer journey, right, is getting more and more complex. Someone needs to bring all of this together, and maybe that's the CRO, by the way, the chief
Hmm.
revenue officer in the true sense of the CRO. So, what I call a true CRO, not a head of sales,
Hmm.
but a head of revenue, right?
Yes, we have a
That's
whole nother
marketing and
podcast on the
sales. That's the
definition
whole
of the
thing.
CRO.
We could also be the number two to the CEO, all those things. So it's It needs to be a person that has experience across a broad set of functions.
Mhm. And a good operational process
And a
oriented
good operational,
approach.
exactly, that's very true. A strong operator muscle, great communicator, collaborator, connector, right? Sorry, not to bring the connector back to me, but you have to have that, and you have to be passionate about it. You have to want to do that.
For sure. And so it's interesting how you've evolved and now you've kind of you're stepping into a broader role. You mentioned HR earlier. Are there any like nuggets of aha moments that as you
Yes,
like
I have
listen to
you.
these, you're like,
Actually,
oh my gosh.
yes. Funny enough, some of us were talking about this morning. I mean, not, now I touch HR, training and enablement. I've done that before. I wasn't expected to be involved in finance, but now I am, um, which is great for me because I have the theoretical knowledge in finance, but I've never had to be involved in P&L and cash flow and all that stuff before. And so now I work directly with a fractional CFO firm, which we just hired. And so that's a whole other new area for me, which I'm excited about. But the biggest aha, honestly, is HR. And I've touched HR before, but not to this with this breadth. I was more involved with HR previously as it related to training and enablement, performance reviews, employer branding, and those kinds of things. But now I'm really getting into the weeds of like payroll and recruiting and HR technology and all that. And the thing with HR is there's quite a few hair on fire situations. I mean, there's a lot of compliance. You can find out that you're out of compliance, you didn't know. So you have to drop everything you're doing and address it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I would say that's kind of a big aha. And I have even more respect now that I have for people, HR leaders, because I learn more about that function. It's very
Yeah, I mean, as you were saying that, I'm like, you're so right. I mean, who has the most emergencies that are like really critical?
yes.
Um, yeah, HR. HR. That's the people part's the hardest part, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Wow.
it's
I
interesting.
didn't.
I'm very excited that I'm involved. It's always been an area I was passionate about, so it's good to be getting deeper in that.
Well, I love your perspective, and I know that we're coming up on time here, but I always like to end our episodes with uh, some takeaways that our listeners can, practical takeaways. Our audience are, they're all around high growth B2B companies, enabling that, supporting it. And you've given us some fantastic advice and wisdom in from your success. What are some practical takeaways that if you were to just, say, hey, if you got anything from this episode, I hope you got this. What would you
Yeah,
say?
a few things. One is again, help your company in whatever leadership role you're in. Help your company be honest about its value prop. Again, not the value prop and what that we would like to have or we wish we had, or it truly today, what makes us, what's our core competency and what makes us really unique. So I think being very, very honest about that. The other thing as it relates to this, and we didn't talk about this, is what I call follow the money. I think for any leader, especially in marketing, by the way, understand how the company makes money. Inside and out, all the permutations, especially if you're in an environment where channel and partner drives a lot of the revenue and demand and all that. Like, there's a lot of permutations of sort of how the money flows around. So really understand that. Stay close to customers, understand the triggers, the pain points, why they buy, all those things. And then lastly, in any leadership role, I think we're business leaders first, and we are functional leaders second. Um, where can you add value beyond your swim lane? Right. And that's really honestly how I got to here, is because I was doing my job in whatever usually marketing role I was in earlier on, but I was always looking for opportunities out of my swim lane, and I would always raise my hand to help.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think, excuse me, my eyes are burning. Um, obviously, you want to deliver on your role first, but look around the corner. If you see problems, go in to fix them. And you know what? Sometimes that means don't ask for permission, ask for forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you ask for permission. But I took a special project on for from the CEO and a couple of jobs back, and that's what landed me in a business operations role because we were doing so well with this special project that the CEO decided he wanted to create a full-time role, and so I stepped in it,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so I left my CMO role and got into global expansion, and then I learned more about business operations and so on. So it's be curious and look around you. There's again, we're business leaders first. We're here to drive the business forward, and we're functional leaders second.
I love that. Well, no wonder you've been so successful, Isabelle, because I think the words of wisdom that you're leaving our audience with are really powerful.
Thank you.
Definitely echo my experience as well. I wish I had that type of, understanding way back early in my career. So, thank you so much for sharing it with us. And I'm excited to see where you're headed, and would love to have you back to let us know kind of what the next phase looks like for you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thanks again for the time. This was wonderful.